Okay, sourdough bread. This is a recipe that I've developed. It started with a sheep herder's sourdough bread, and I have modified it slightly and changed a few things. But it's basically still the same, just a simple little sourdough bread that I'm going to make this day. I start off with 4 cups of flour, preferably the quality of the King Arthur bread flour or something similar. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 cups of flour we start with. We set that aside. We may need a little more in a minute. I put 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar in it. Put a teaspoon of salt. I used a coarse granulated salt, which comes out to really little less than a full teaspoon, but I'm using half a measure here. 1/2 and 1/2. And I put 1/2 a teaspoon of baking soda. Once I have the dry mixtures in, I mix it up, kind of blend that well, just mix it up. I need a deep bowl to work this much flour into. Kind of blend that just a little bit, and I put in between 2 and 3 tablespoons of oil. I've used vegetable oil, I've used olive oil. It doesn't seem to make any difference in the flavor, and I'm kind of generous on my measurements on this. And maybe a little extra. Put that aside, put this aside, and I found it better to kind of mix this in before I dump in my starter. And what I do with the starter, I don't think this probably doesn't really matter, but it seems to work better for me if I do this, kind of blend this in. And on the starter, what I've done is I've started keeping all of my discard every day in the refrigerator, and then when I get ready to make bread, I have quite a bit of discard available. I have this whole cup here, and I have another 3/4 of a cup, and I'm going to dump all that in. And if you notice, there's a slight coloration of brown. When I feed it sometimes half whole wheat, sometimes half white flour. But I'm going to put both of those in, and then blend it all together. A lot of starter, a lot of discard, but it makes a good bread. Simple, it rises good. I put no active yeast in it. I use just what's in this discard. Put that one in. There's no exact measurement on this. I just put what I have in there. And when I finish up, if I need more flour, I put it in. If I need a little water, I put it in to get the texture and consistency I'm looking for. Bowl here, I'm going to get it off. Okay, once I have that, it's quite a mess in there. I'll take my mixer with the dough hooks and I'll start working around the edges, just kind of blending it in until I can get it where I can work it with my hands. It's just too wet and sticky right now to work with your hands. It's just, you can do it, but it's really a pain. I found this is a much better process. You see, in just a short time, it's starting to form up good. Still a lot of flour down in the bottom. It hasn't mixed in yet. And once I get it where I can manage it a little better with my hand, that's what I'm going to do. Just keep working around the edges and down into the bottom, trying to get all that flour that's down there. Starting to work in now, starting to take form, drying up a little bit, but I can manage it by hand. Pretty much now I can turn it over now by hand and get that flour out the bottom. and get it to mix in. Once I pretty much, one good indication is when I bring the hooks up and there's very little dough left on them. It's still pretty wet there, but what I'm going to do is I'll keep my flour handy in case I need some when I'm working it. Push this off the edges here. And again, this is kind of a use up my discard, but I'll take this and I'll just turn it over. And some people take, if you look at the recipes, they tell you to do the whole thing like this, never use the dough hooks. But I found I like this better. And just keep turning it over and trying to get all that flour. Still a lot of flour down there in the bottom. Not a lot, but still quite a bit of flour in the bottom. Don't get in too big a hurry to add flour or water, because you just got to let it work together. You notice it looked way too wet. Now I'm looking at it, maybe I even need a little bit of water, because I still got some flour in the bottom I'm trying to blend into it. But it's getting close. That looks dry, looks like it's not working, but from my experience that's probably going to work out to be about right. Once I get it all blended in, once all the chemical things and the stuff that the flour and the water and everything does together. See, it's starting to form up. Now it's getting close. Still a little wet in some of the spots. I may sprinkle it with some flour. I'm starting to look good now. Nowhere close ready to rise, but it's starting to come together. And having large hands makes it easier. And you could take this out and work it on the counter. It doesn't have to work it free-handed the way I do. I just like doing it, like feel the dough in my hand, working it. But see, it's taking shape, starting to together. It's not sticking to my hand, just barely tacky. And you see this pretty much all my flour's out of the bottom. A little bit in there. I'm going to roll it down in that little bit, pick it up, because it's getting a little tacky on my hands. I may need a little more flour. You can see it pulling off there. Don't want it quite that wet. But it's at the point where just a little bit of flour, a little bit of I just take and sprinkle a little bit over it when it gets like that. That's about all you need. Yes, that was my standard white flour, not the bread flour. It's easier to get it out that little scooper. And blend just a little bit over the top. Now it's coming together good. It's starting to form up. It looks good consistency. Got a little bit of tearing there still. I'm going to work it a little more to get that out. Still a little sticky. You can see a little bit pulling off of my hands. Just a little more flour. Work it in there like that. Want to work it around, get that flour all around it. And what I want to see is I want to be able to work it without it tearing so much like that. Now, that's working good. Got a little bit of tearing still in it, but feels good, it looks good. This amount I'm dealing with here will make 2 9x5 loaves, and it'll rise relatively fast. It'll take me about an hour. I'll let it rise the first time, and it'll almost double in size. And then I'll take it, split it in two, make 2 loaves out of it, put it in a greased 5x9 loaf pans, let it rise for another couple hours till it gets about an inch over the top of the loaf pan. And I bake it at 400 degrees about 30 minutes. I'm looking for an internal temperature of 190 degrees when I bake it. I found that works good for me. Takes the guesswork out of it. But you see that dough has come together now, makes a nice round loaf here. It forms well together. It's not dry, but it's not tacky. It doesn't stick to my hand anymore. I look at the bottom and I see that's normal. When you should be able to pinch it together and close those up. But really when it rises, it'll take care of itself. But that's about what I'm looking for, is that dough there. And now I'm going to put it in a greased pan. When it comes up pretty much to the top, that's when I'm going to bake it. And that's when I'm going to take it out for the next rise. But I cover this with a saran wrap, plastic wrap, whatever you want to call it. And to make sure it doesn't stick, because sometimes it'll rise pretty quick on you, I'll actually spray the underside of this plastic. In case it comes up, it won't stick to the plastic. Now that's ready to rise, and about an hour we'll be able to split it in the loaves and put it in the oven.